Half an acre cannot support real self-sufficiency, or so every online farming guru insists. They are simply wrong, and Amish households have proven it for more than 2 centuries running. Eggs, meat, fresh milk, honey, natural pest control, and free garden fertilizer, all from one small plot. 7 animals most modern backyard growers have never once considered raising side by side. Here is the part almost nobody explains properly. It was never just about the species you pick. It comes down to how those 7 animals function together as a single connected system. Each one solves a problem none of the others can touch on their own. Pull one piece out and suddenly everything gets harder, slower, and far more expensive. Today, you get the exact 7 animals Amish families run on half an acre, and why each one earns its spot. You will also see how to set them up so the whole operation practically runs on autopilot. By the time this video ends, you will have a full blueprint for feeding your household without ever buying eggs, meat, milk, or honey again. Let's get straight into it, starting with what usually goes wrong on small homesteads first. Here is the pattern playing out on most small properties right now. Chickens, because everyone recommends chickens. Then a few ducks get added because some video online said they were essential too. Maybe a goat gets bought on impulse at a livestock auction one random Saturday. Now 3 separate feeding schedules, 3 different shelters, and a bill bigger than the grocery store ever charged. The typical backyard flock owner spends between $500 and $700 a year on commercial feed for chickens alone. Throw in ducks, 1 goat, maybe a few rabbits, and that number climbs toward $200 annually fast. And that figure does not even include vet visits, bedding, fence repairs, or replacing lost birds. So what comes back for all that spending? A handful of eggs and some milk nobody knows how to store correctly. Maybe 1 frozen rabbit from that single afternoon someone tried processing after watching a tutorial. Meanwhile, the feed store keeps raising prices every single season without slowing down. A 50-pound bag of layer pellets that cost $14 3 years ago now runs $19 to $22. Scratch grain tells the same story. And do not even start on the price of hay these days. The real issue was never the animals themselves. It was nobody teaching people to pick animals that cooperate. Livestock ends up competing for the exact same resources instead of covering separate jobs on the property. More work, more spending, less produced, while an Amish family runs the identical half-acre with almost no stress. That is not a work ethic failure. That is a system design failure with a solution hiding in plain sight. The Amish never learned this from a trending video or an algorithm chasing clicks. They learned it from pure necessity, generation after generation, with no other option available. For over 200 years, these communities have run small diversified farms with no electricity and no tractors. No feed company representative was ever there whispering suggestions about what to purchase next. When your family's survival depends entirely on what the land actually produces, guesswork disappears quickly. And here is the mindset shift. Traditional farming communities understood that most modern homesteaders forgot completely. Animals were never meant to be separate hobby projects. They are components inside one working system. Each animal fills a specific role: protein, dairy, pest control, soil fertility, pollination, or income. Stack the right combination together, and they start reducing each other's costs automatically over time. Chicken manure feeds the garden. Garden scraps feed the rabbits. Rabbit droppings return straight to the soil. Goats clear brush that would otherwise choke out usable pasture within a single growing season. Ducks eliminate the exact pests that would otherwise wreck an entire row of vegetables. Bees pollinate everything on the property and lift overall yields by 30 to 50%. None of this is some trendy permaculture theory dreamed up recently by internet homesteaders. This is how small farms operated for centuries before commercial agriculture pushed specialization and supply chains. That knowledge never vanished because it quit working. It vanished because it stopped being profitable for feed and chemical companies. The Amish simply never got that particular memo, and they kept doing what already worked. What works is a carefully chosen lineup of animals, each one earning real estate on limited land. Today, you get that exact lineup, animal by animal, with the specific numbers behind every single one. First up, laying hens. The animal every Amish homestead adds first, and the one no serious homesteader should ever drop. 6 hens is genuinely all it takes to change a household's relationship with grocery store eggs. 6 birds produce somewhere around 1,800 to 2,000 eggs a year for a family of 4. That covers breakfast every single morning, with extra eggs left over to trade, sell, or give to neighbors. But Amish flocks are not managed the way most backyard keepers run theirs day to day. During daylight hours, those birds roam free, scratching through grass and hunting down insects non-stop. They devour kitchen scraps and garden waste, cutting feed costs by roughly 25 to 30%. Your chickens are essentially paying rent by eating pests you would otherwise have to deal with yourself. Breed selection matters here more than most beginners ever realize when they walk into the feed store. Commercial hybrid hens lay like machines for 2 years, and then their production basically collapses. Heritage breeds like Buff Orpingtons and Rhode Island Reds keep producing reliably well into year 4. They shrug off brutal winters without any heated coop and forage far harder than hybrid birds ever will. The Amish choose heritage breeds every single time, since reliability beats a short 2-year sprint. One hen costs roughly $15 a year to feed under a free-range setup like this. She returns $50 or more in eggs, a return most financial investments simply cannot match. Chickens only solve part of the protein equation though, and that is where the next animal steps in. What happens when you need real freezer-filling meat, but neighbors sit 10 feet from your fence line? Second, rabbits, and the feed conversion numbers here are almost unfair compared to anything else you could raise. Every 10 pounds of feed you give a rabbit returns roughly 6 pounds of usable meat. Compare that to cattle, which need close to 8 pounds of feed for a single pound of beef. Rabbits convert feed into protein faster than almost any common livestock animal alive today. The real advantage, though, is space, since rabbits need almost none of it to produce serious volume. 20 rabbits fit comfortably inside a 10 by 10 foot shed using simple stacked wire hutches. You end up running a legitimate meat operation in less square footage than a single parking space. One breeding doe produces around 50 pounds of dressed meat across an entire year, and that is not a typo. 3 does, properly managed, and most Amish households never buy meat from a store again. The meat itself tastes close to mild chicken, but carries noticeably less fat and cholesterol. Those small pellet droppings amount to garden gold you never have to think twice about. Unlike raw chicken manure that can burn tender plants, rabbit pellets go straight into vegetable rows. No composting wait, no timing concerns, just free fertilizer running on complete autopilot. One critical rule matters here: never feed rabbits iceberg lettuce or any cabbage at all. It causes deadly bloat, so stick to quality hay, pellets, and the occasional apple twig treat. Simple, cheap to maintain, and your rabbits stay genuinely healthy under this kind of feeding routine. Protein is solved at this point, but rabbit meat will not exactly work in your morning coffee. For that you need something with actual hooves that does not demand its own dedicated barn. Back in 1985, more than half the Amish men in one Ohio county worked inside local factories. Today, that number sits below 10%, as families rewired their lives entirely around resilience. Now it is your turn to do the same thing on whatever small piece of land you have. Third, Nigerian dwarf goats, standing barely 2 feet tall, yet solving the entire dairy question at once. This is the Amish answer to fresh milk without needing serious acreage set aside for pasture. One doe produces up to half a gallon of milk daily, which adds up faster than people expect. That covers your morning coffee, cereal, cheese for winter, with milk left over for making soap. Some Amish women sell handmade goat milk soap at local markets for $8 a single bar. The fat globules inside goat milk run smaller than those in cow milk, making it far easier to digest. People who struggled with regular dairy for years often switch to goat milk, and the issues simply disappear. Butterfat content runs between 6 and 10%, compared to just 3 to 4% in store-bought milk. 2 does on half an acre covers the entire dairy operation from start to finish. A basic 3-sided shelter keeps them comfortable through winter with no massive barn required. Here is the trick that saves hours of frustration: feed grain only during actual milking sessions. Do this consistently, and your goats will sprint straight to the milking stand on their own. No wrestling, no chasing animals around the yard while your morning coffee goes cold in the mug. Upfront cost runs between $200 and $400 per doe, which sounds steep at first glance. That is, until you calculate, a family easily spends $1,500 yearly on dairy products alone. Your goats pay for themselves before the very first year of ownership is even finished. One rule stands non-negotiable: never keep a single goat alone under any circumstance. A lonely goat stops eating, stops producing milk, and starts screaming at every hour of the day. Always buy 2 goats together, since this particular rule is genuinely not optional at all. Milk, cheese, cream, and soap are all covered now, but your garden is still under constant attack. Slugs, mosquitoes, and every crawling pest imaginable are still tearing through your vegetable beds. For that specific problem, you need something with feathers and a genuinely bad attitude toward bugs. Fourth, Muscovy ducks, looking like someone crossed a turkey with a duck and added a red mask for effect. They will never win a beauty contest, but Amish families never kept them for their looks anyway. These birds eat insects the way hungry teenagers plow through an entire pizza in one sitting. One Muscovy duck consumes roughly 100 mosquito larvae every single day without any encouragement. Ticks, slugs, Japanese beetles, anything crawling through your garden rows gets handled automatically. These ducks patrol your property like feathered exterminators working for a fraction of chemical pest control costs. Here is the detail that genuinely surprises most people the first time they hear it explained. Muscovies do not quack at all, unlike regular ducks that sound like alarm clocks with attitude. Muscovies just hiss quietly and wag their tails, meaning neighbors barely notice they exist. These ducks essentially raise themselves without much intervention required from you at any point. A Muscovy hen hatches 3 to 4 clutches yearly, with 0 incubators or heat lamps involved. She handles every part of that process while you sip your morning coffee in complete peace. The meat itself tastes nothing like standard duck, leaner and richer, sitting closer to beef. Old-timers used to call it the poor man's roast, and they meant that as genuine praise. Skip building an actual pond, since a plastic kiddie pool refilled twice weekly handles their water needs. Total setup cost stays under $40 for water alone, which is remarkably cheap. One warning though, Muscovies can fly, so clip the flight feathers on just one wing regularly. This throws off their balance enough to keep them grounded without ever causing them any harm. Skip that single step, and watch your ducks quietly become your neighbor's ducks within days. Fifth, American Guinea hogs, looking like pot-bellied pigs that hit the gym and got serious about it. Compact, muscular, and genuinely easy to manage compared to most commercial pig breeds available. Here is exactly why Amish families still keep them on small acreage generation after generation. These pigs essentially work for their dinner every single day without any real coaxing involved. Put guinea hogs on a garden plot and watch them transform into living rototillers overnight. They root up every weed, turn soil 6 inches deep, and fertilize the ground as they move through it. By spring, that patch sits ready for planting without you ever touching a single shovel. Full grown, these heritage pigs top out around 150 to 200 pounds total. Compare that to commercial hogs pushing 400 pounds or more at full maturity. You will not need a forklift or 3 strong neighbors helping out on processing day. One person alone can handle a guinea hog without throwing their back out in the process. Forget expensive commercial pig feed entirely, since these animals thrive on pasture and garden scraps. Windfall apples your own trees drop anyway make up a huge portion of their diet for free. Feed costs drop by 40 to 60% compared to raising standard commercial pig breeds. The lard is where things get genuinely interesting for anyone who bakes or fries regularly. Guinea hog fat renders into pure white lard that Amish grandmothers guard like a secret family recipe. Pie crusts turn impossibly flaky, fried chicken comes out perfect, and soap making becomes far easier too. One breeding pair produces 6 to 8 piglets twice a year, so the numbers add up quickly. That is potentially 16 pigs annually coming from just 2 original breeding animals. Your freezer fills with bacon, ham, and sausage, while extras remain for selling or trading locally. One rule matters here: keep pigs at least 100 feet away from any well on the property. Their waste carries serious nitrogen that seeps into groundwater faster than most people realize. Meat, lard, and completely free garden prep. But what if you need eggs faster than any chicken delivers? Sixth, Coturnix quail. And these birds start laying eggs at just 6 weeks of age. Here is where things get genuinely interesting for anyone stuck living inside a restrictive subdivision. Many townships legally do not classify quail as poultry under their local zoning rules at all. Read that again. Your city might ban chickens outright, while quietly waving quail straight through. Homesteaders have raised 30 quail inside a garage, while neighbors argue with City Hall over 3 hens. Call it a genuine loophole with feathers attached to it, and a fairly profitable one at that. Space requirements border on absurd when you actually compare them to any other bird. 12 quail fit comfortably inside a 2x4 foot cage, smaller than a coffee table. Stack 2 cages together, and you are pulling 2 dozen eggs daily from almost no floor space. Nutritionally, these tiny eggs punch well above their size in almost every measurable category. 5 quail eggs equal 1 chicken egg in overall size, yet contain triple the vitamin B12. Gram for gram, they behave like chicken eggs that somehow went through medical school first. The real money move is pickled quail eggs, and here is exactly why that matters so much. Amish roadside stands sell them for $8 to $10 per dozen, soaked in beet juice until deep purple. One family covers their entire annual property tax bill just from Saturday morning pickled egg sales. One real challenge worth knowing, quail almost never go broody, since that instinct got bred out long ago. You will need a small incubator on hand for hatching any replacement birds down the line. A decent incubator runs $40 to $60, holds 50 eggs, and pays for itself after one hatch. Quick production, a tiny footprint, legal where chickens are not, and a genuinely premium selling price. But what about multiplying everything your garden already grows without eating a single plant yourself? Seventh, honeybees and bees do not eat your tomatoes. They multiply every single one of them instead of. One backyard hive pollinates every fruiting plant within roughly a 2-mile radius of your property. Tomatoes, squash, cucumbers, apple trees, anything needing a flower to become food suddenly overperforms. That is not marketing exaggeration. That is 60,000 tiny workers visiting your garden daily for free. And unlike most livestock, these particular workers actually pay rent back to you directly. A single established colony produces 30 to 60 pounds of surplus honey across 1 full year. Surplus meaning after the bees have already kept everything they personally need to survive winter. You end up running a honey operation where the workers feed themselves and build their own housing. Local raw honey sells for $10 to $15 per pound at most farmers markets around the country. One productive hive can generate $300 to $900 in honey income on its own. That figure does not even include the beeswax, which carries its own separate value entirely. One hive's wax provides enough material for a full year of candles, lip balm, and wood polish. Amish women render that wax down and stop buying any of those household products at all. Some sell it locally instead, often at double what raw honey alone would have brought in. The Amish generally prefer Langstroth hives for one very practical and specific reason. Removable frames slide out like file folders, which matters enormously once your knees start aching with age. Inspect the frame, harvest what you need, then slide it right back into place when finished. Timing matters quite a bit here, since April tends to be the ideal window for starting out. Package bees run around $150 to $180 in early spring season. Way too long, and you end up paying more for weaker colonies unlikely to survive the winter. One Amish trick worth remembering: always face your hive entrance toward the southeast direction. Morning sun hits it early, warms the bees quickly, and gets them foraging before nearby colonies wake up. More working hours for the hive translates directly into more food growing across your property. 7 animals, 1 connected system, and genuine full self-sufficiency, achievable on half an acre of land. Honestly, none of this seemed believable the first time this kind of integrated small acreage system got researched. It looked like one of those ideas that reads beautifully on paper, but collapses once real life intervenes. Too many animals, too many feeding schedules, too many variables that could go wrong on tiny land. So the starting point stayed deliberately small and skeptical. just a handful of hens and a pair of rabbits. The plan was simple. If feed costs stayed reasonable and the animals stayed manageable, more would follow. Within 3 months, something genuinely clicked into place across the entire small setup. Chicken manure went straight into a compost bin, while rabbit droppings went directly onto garden beds. Vegetable yields that very first summer jumped noticeably, not slightly, but genuinely noticeably higher. Tomato plants that usually produced around 15 pounds each were suddenly pushing past 20 pounds. That fall Muscovy ducks joined the mix, and a 2-year slug problem disappeared within weeks. Traps and beer pans had failed for 2 straight years, then simply became unnecessary entirely. Those ducks walked the garden rows every single morning like they were officially on the payroll. By the following spring, goats were producing milk, quail filled winter egg gaps, and a hive boosted pollination everywhere. Total feed spending that second year dropped to roughly $600 for every species combined. The prior year had cost $480 on chickens alone for a fraction of the output. That is the exact point where skepticism turned into genuine conviction about the whole system. The system works precisely because every animal supports the others in some direct way. Picture the same property 2 years from now under this exact kind of integrated setup. Hens producing more eggs than any single family could realistically eat in a week. Rabbits filling the freezer twice yearly without a single trip to any butcher shop required. Goats delivering fresh milk every morning that tastes noticeably better than anything sold in cartons. Ducks patrolling the garden so thoroughly that spraying any chemical becomes completely unnecessary. Quail covering the entire property tax bill through nothing more than Saturday morning sales. Bees boosting every fruiting plant on the property while generating honey income almost effortlessly. The feed bill stays flat because each animal's waste becomes another animal's input somewhere else. The compost pile essentially runs itself, while the garden produces more food with every passing season. Grocery store prices stop mattering because the household stopped depending on them in the first place. Supply chain problems turn into something watched on the news instead of something felt at home. This is what Amish communities have quietly built across generations without any social media attention. Not a picture-perfect homestead designed for photos, but a working system that feeds a real family. Half an acre, 7 animals, and complete food independence sitting well within reach right now. So here is the real question. Which of these 7 animals would go onto your property first? Drop that answer in the comments, since every single one gets read and considered carefully. If this video changed how you see what is actually possible on a small piece of land, hit subscribe. New breakdowns of proven self-sufficiency systems go up every single week without exception. Your half acre was never too small. You simply had not organized it the Amish way yet. Now that knowledge is sitting right here waiting, so go build the exact system for yourself.